Blessings Booktube. I'm doing a Bullwinkld fairy tale for you as my Poetry Thursday. I'm going to give you the verse form of Tom Thumb. I'm going to do it backwards this time by beginning with telling you about the Bullwinkld form of the story. There are actually two versions that Bullwinkld did. There's a straight up version with Merlin and all the usual. And then there's a slightly more interesting one in which the father to be is a mud maker, and his wife throws his food on top of him all the time because she's sad because she doesn't have a child. So he goes off to a witch who lives in a cheese house for some reason and is very cranky. But she does grant his wish, and when he gets home, his wife has put Tom Thumb, the little baby found on the doorstep, in a thimble and says, never mind, don't worry, he will grow. 11 years later, 30 years later, I don't know how many years later, he's still in his thimble. So the mud maker goes back to the witch in the cheese house and says, hey, let's make this baby grow. She gives him a chickpea to put under the thimble. So the mud maker, puts the chickpea under the thimble, and in the morning he's got a giant baby as big as the house. And the problem is, of course, this baby eats him out of house and home. So they eventually send him on his way, and he eats a path through the forest. Luckily, at the same time, there is a king who is given a magical duck who lays infinite eggs. And the problem is the kingdom is soon like overflowing with eggs. And so they brew it about that, hear ye, they need someone to take care of these eggs. Here comes the mud maker. He says, my son can take care of your eggs. By the way, his name is, instead of Tom Thumb, it's Thumb Tum. Boom, 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 boom. And he eats all the eggs. But the problem is he keeps eating, right? He eats the furniture, he eats the walls. He's basically eating the kingdom. And the king says, promises the mud maker family that he will give them their own kingdom if they will take their son away, and they agree. And what do? In their new kingdom, they outlaw food. There's no food allowed, and they feed the son nothing but mud pies. So what this shows is the size anxiety, right, of fairy tales. So besides the bleeding element, which is, girls reaching menses in fairy tales, there's also often this anxiety of smallness, right? And if you notice, a lot of the larger characters are, ogres, trolls. They're sort of hairy. They have big noses, big ears. Witches also are depicted this way. Basically, these are the traits of oldness. So, and of course, they're giants. So you got this anxiety of sort of bigness and oldness, getting older, right? So that is a big feature of fairy tales that is sort of highlighted, I think, in this retelling. So now to the delightful verse form of Tom Thumb. The original was from, the 1100s, English folktale, and it was eventually written down. Defoe did it as in a play, for example. But the verse form that I found here on, and maybe I'll give the link because I don't know how to get around it, doesn't have an author credited. So it's not that long, but stick around to the end because at the end I'm going to share a Japanese version with you, which is very short. So here is the verse form of the original Tom Thumb. In the days when the good old King Arthur was able to feast nights each day at his famous round table, there lived in a cottage, it matters not where, indeed I don't know, and I'm sure you don't care, a thrifty young farmer, and he and his wife knew little of trouble and nothing of strife. It happened one day that the lady felt sad. She cried, oh, I wish that a baby I had. Have your wish then, a voice from her pocket replied. Up went both her hands and her eyes opened wide, and out of her pocket a fairy arose. In what shape or form there is no one who knows. But just as her handkerchief fell to the ground, she heard in her pocket another strange sound. Mamma, dear mamma, see, I have come. just the length and the thickness of dear Papa's thumb. Mama said, "How's charming, how we are so blessed. But child, you'll take cold and have come quite undressed. From those pea pods the stuff for a coat you can choose. 2 pips of this apple will make you nice shoes. And if a not good boy, you will promise to be knickerbockers all scraped from that carrot, you see." And then to the cottage the fairy queen came and said to the lady, "Your boy I will name." She waved her white wand and said, "Boy, hither come. Henceforth and forever your name is Tom Thumb." "Oh, what a nice name," his fond mother said. "I'm glad he is named. He can now go to bed. With a bean pod, a very snug crib we can make, and for curtains the skins of 2 cherries I'll take." So Tom Thumb went to bed without crying each night, and got up by a ladder as soon as 'twas light. Tom went with his mother to see a dun cow. The leaf of a thistle he took for a bough. He sat down upon it, but, shocking to tell, the cow seized the thistle, and Tom Thumb as well. To the cow's upper jaw Tom manfully clung. He clicked her front teeth, and she tickled her tongue. The cow could not ask him what he was about, so she opened her mouth and she let him jump out. To his mother he ran, told his tale, and she soon gave him a bath in an old silver spoon. How to play games with cherry stones Tommy soon knew, for the longer he lived the more cunning he grew. But Tom was dishonest, I'm sorry to say, for he stole cherry stones in a curious way. Into the bags of his playmates he crept, and there sometimes till morning he quietly slept, then helped himself to that with cherry stones he seemed always provided with plenty to be. A boy caught him one day in his bag stealing stones, and he fastened and shook it, not heeding Tom's groans. Then he let out our hero, who felt very sore, and said that he never would steal any more. Tom's mother was mixing a pudding one day. He fell into the batter, and sprawling he lay. He was bound in a cloth and put into the pot, but he soon began kicking. The water was hot. "The pudding's bewitched," said his mother, "so I will give it to Tinker, who is now passing by." The tinker was pleased, but he soon was afraid, for Tom and the pudding a dismal noise made. Said the tinker, "Of puddings this pudding is worst," and he threw it right over the hedge, where it burst. Then Tommy ran home, so ill it is said, that he bathed in a teacup and put into bed. 2 days after that, Tom was seized by a crow, who bore him away to grim giant Grumbo. The giant exclaimed, "What a queer little fly! I'll put it in water, and there let it die." Then into the river poor Tom Thumb was thrown, and make a small splash like a round pebble stone. He was seized by a salmon, who swallowed him whole. But just then a fisherman named Simon Cole caught the salmon and sent him, without much delay, to the king, who for salmon would handsomely pay. The salmon was cut, but it took the cook's stare, for as no doubt you guess, our small hero was there. When King Arthur saw Tom, he was filled with delight, and he and the queen kept awake all the night. And before they did that, the king asked Tom his name, and of course Tom had read of King Arthur's great fame, so Tom told him his name and his history also, and said, "I would like my mother to go." "Then go," said the king, "but pray come again soon." Tom said, "I'll be with you tomorrow at noon." Tom did as he promised, but shocking to tell, into hot porridge made for the king Tommy fell. A maid took him out. "Poor fellow," said she, "I think in a mouse trap much safer you'll be." The maid quite forgot about Tom in the trap, till the king, having heard of this awkward mishap, sent 2 or 3 pages of honor to know why Tom Thumb was kept in the kitchen below. The servants all then were, of course, much afraid, and went down on their knees. When Jemima the maid recollected the trap, and to Tom Thumb she went, to tell him the message King Arthur had sent, and begged for her pardon, and he'd do what he could. Tom Thumb very kindly replied that he would. So as soon as before great King Arthur he came, he said, "Pardon the servants, they are not to blame." And as for Jemima, no maid have I seen so thoughtful and civil and steady and clean. Yea, all that she does is so worthy of praise, that I hope great King Arthur her wages will raise. The king was so pleased that he could not say no. He turned to Earl Marshal and said, "My lord, go tell Jemima the maid she has nothing to fear, her wages are raised 13 shillings a year." Then the Earl Marshal bowed himself down to the ground and said, "My lord king, there is not to be found such a generous monarch throughout all the land. Most gladly I'll do what you're pleased to command." Tom Thumb so delighted the king and the queen that wherever they went he was sure to be seen. In the king's waistcoat pocket he sometimes would loll, sometimes he would lounge in the queen's parasol. A ladder he had to get her into his lap, and he sometimes would hide in the bows of her cap. Once a captain came in who had on a new coat. Tom Thumb, just to tease him, jumped right down his throat. The captain, alarmed, sent his pages, strong men, By the time they arrived, Tom had jumped back again. The captain was vexed, but what could he do? The king and the queen laughed. He was forced to laugh too. But he said to Earl Marshal, the next time I come, I'll keep far enough from that little Tom Thumb. All right, and now to the last page here. In the other video version and the other written version that I read of this, Tom Thumb is actually made by Merlin. When he overhears a lady saying, oh, I wish I had a baby, though he were no bigger than my thumb. And Merlin laughed himself silly, thought that was so hilarious that he made it come true. All right, back to King Arthur for fun, made Tom Thumb a knight. He was armed with a sword and was taught how to fight. Instead of a steed, he rode a white mouse, who knew all the corners and holes in the house. One day a great cat came rushing at Tom, but he told her to go to the place she came from. She did not move on. Tom thought she would scratch, or that perhaps she might fancy his white mouse to catch. So he drew his good sword, so sharp and so bright. Puss ran with dismay and half fainted from fright, and the king and the queen in the court slept one day. The fairy queen Mab came and fetched Tom away. In the land of the fairies he dwells for some years, and then once again in old England appears. But the times are now changed, and King Arthur is dead, and Thunstone, another king, reigns in his stead. Tom went to the palace without much ado. He was shown to King Thunstone, who said, who are you? Tom bowed to the king and the queen, his fair bride, and thus in his musical voice he replied, my name is Tom Thumb, from the fairies I come. When King Arthur shone, this court was my own. In me he delighted, for him I was knighted. Did you never hear of Sir Thomas Thumb? The king said, Sir Thomas, I hope you'll agree to live here to play with the queen and with me. So Tom went to the palace and lived at his ease, and tried how the king and the queen he could please. A carriage he had out of orange peel made. 6 white mice he drew it. His orders obeyed, and day after day Tom Thumb might be seen with his carriage and mice near the king and the queen. But the queen soon got jealous and said, I declare, Tom Thumb has a carriage as well as a chair. When I asked for a carriage, I met with reproach, and was told I must use the old family coach. I don't know, I'm sure, to what things may come, if the king spends so much on that little Tom Thumb. So he went to the king, and his face was quite red. Dear, what is the matter? The king to her said, oh, I don't like to tell, but I must tell, said she, that Tom Thumb behaves oh so rudely to me. The king said, I thought he was always polite. Said the queen, he is civil when you are in sight. But oh, I so hate him, I wish he were dead. To oblige you, said the king, we'll cut off his head. So he sent out his soldiers to find Sir Tom Thumb. The trumpets they blew and they beat the big drum, and if any boys out in the street asked them why, they answered, because a brave knight is to die. Tom heard it and said, I don't know as to that. Ere they cut off my head, I'll put on my hat. Tom ran to his mother and told her his life was in danger because of the king's jealous wife. So his mother advised him to lay still in bed in order to save both his clothes and his head. So Tom went to bed and he slept for 10 days, and to sleep longer still he tried all sorts of ways. At last he was tired of keeping awake, so he said, I'll get up, and a walk I will take. He walked for 2 days, and for 3 or 4 nights, saw all sorts of people and all sorts of sights. Then he thought he must rest, or his strength would soon fail, and he went to lie down in the shell of a snail. Tom soon fell asleep, but somebody spoke, and Tom, in alarm for his safety, awoke. He listened. 'Twas only some children at play. Said he, I had better keep out of their way. They are going to school, and when they are there, to find better lodging will be my first care. Just then came a little girl, 7 years old. Her frock was of silk, trimmed with spangles of gold. She took up the shell in which Tom Thumb was hid, and little she thought of the mischief she did, but she threw up the shell on a very high bank, and amid the long grass, with Tom in it, it sank. The bank to Sir Tom Thumb was a mountain appeared, that he would never get to the bottom he feared. I will take a week to go down it, said he, and when I am down there, what good will it be? I'll stop where I am till a lark comes this way, then I'll mount on its back and fly quite away. Just then as he spoke, he saw near the bank a friend of the queen's, a duke of high rank. I am caught now at last, said poor Tom in a fright, and I must much want to sleep with my head on tonight. But how to escape, I'm sure I can't tell. Ah, there's a fine butterfly close to the shell. I'll jump on its back and be off in a trice. A ride on a butterfly's back must be nice. The Duke saw Sir Thomas just taking his flight, so he called him kindly, Sir Thomas, good night. Oh, Duke, said our hero, I guess what you mean. Good night, sir, and give my respects to the queen. Then up flew the butterfly. Tom with him went, but the butterfly could not make out what it meant. That without asking leave any mortal should dare to jump on his back and take a ride there. So he flew over houses and churches and trees, and Tom soon began to feel not quite at ease. The butterfly tried to make Tom Thumb fall down in a puddle he threw him, that there he might drown. Tom Thumb thought that drowning would not do him good, so he called out for help quite as loud as he could. And whilst he was shouting, 2 soldiers came by. Sir Thomas, they said, the king says you must die. But you know what he said, whilst there's life, there's hope. And 'tis better to wait for the axe or the rope than to drown in a puddle. So now out you come, and we shall get something for finding Tom Thumb. When they came to the palace, the king had gone out. The queen heard a noise and asked what 'twas about. They told her that little Tom Thumb had been found. Before he was found, said the queen, I'll be bound. The king likes that dwarf, and I will not have him killed, but I'll let him know that I too am self-willed. Put Tom in a mousetrap, and there let him stay. Give him nothing to eat or to drink all the day. So there in the trap poor Tom Thumb was kept, and more from vexation than hunger he wept. The king's kitten thought that a mouse or a rat in the trap had been caught, and so she gave it a pat. She was rather surprised when our hero she saw, and she opened the trap by a dab of her paw. Once more Tom was free, but a spider came by, and taking the knight for a blue bottle fly, sprang forward to seize him, when our brave little knight stood his ground, drew his sword, and made ready to fight. But the spider drew near, and his poisonous breath soon affected poor Tom, that it soon caused his death. He fell on the ground where he lately had stood, and the spider sucked up the last drop of his blood. The king and the court into deep mourning went. 2 days and 3 nights in lamenting they spent. Then under a rose bush they buried Tom Thumb. His monument cost them a very large sum, for on it his name, death, and doings were told. It had this inscription in letters of gold. Here lies Tom Thumb, King Arthur's knight, who died by a spider's cruel bite. He was well known in Arthur's court, where he afforded gallant sport. He rode at tilt and tournament, and on a mouse a-hunting went. Alive he filled the court with mirth, his death to sorrow soon gave birth. Wipe your eyes and shake your head and cry, alas, Tom Thumb is dead. So that's the story of Tom Thumb. There is a very analogous Japanese tale called Isun Boshi, which means sort of like the inch-long or the thumb-sized samurai. And it's very short. It goes, long, long ago in a village far away, there was a married couple who had no children and every day prayed to God to give them a child. Finally, one day, a baby boy was born, and the child was only about an inch tall, so they called him Isun Boshi, meaning 1-inch monk. Oh, monk, sorry. I said samurai. But I read samurai in somebody's website, so pardon me for that. Trusting I am. The couple were very pleased and took care of Isun Boshi. Isun Boshi never did get much taller. Even after several years had passed, he was still about the size of a person's thumb. Still, he was as healthy as any normal boy, full of energy. One day, Isun Boshi said to his parents, I thank you very much for raising me with love and care, but now I must go to the capital to see the big wide world. I want to be a strong samurai warrior. Aha. His mother and father tried hard to make him change his mind, but he was so determined. Finally, they gave in. And next morning, they all went to the river. Isun Boshi got in his tiny rice bowl boat and waved goodbye to his parents. Then he went down the river paddling with a chopstick. He had a needle sword about his waist. Along the way, the tiny boat slammed into rocks, dropped over waterfalls, and got tossed around in raging streams. But Isun Boshi never gave up. His dream grew bigger and his ambition greater as he overcame hardships. Many days went by before Isun Boshi at last caught sight of his destination. There the capital was glaring before this tiny but brave boy. As he walked down the street, Isun Boshi saw a grand house that must belong to a wealthy lord. He walked to the front door and called out. A servant came to the door, but didn't see anyone. Then the lord came to the door himself. Here I am, down here, shouted Isun Boshi. The lord looked down. There he found a tiny boy standing by a pair of wooden sandals. The boy was much smaller than the sandals. Isun Boshi said to the lord, I've come all the way to see the world. Please let me serve you as one of your guards. I may be very small, but I am very strong and full of courage. All right, you may stay here and be a playmate for my daughter, the princess, said the lord, amused by this tiny boy. And soon Isun Boshi and the princess became best friends. They spent time together reading, writing, and playing music. And while he passed his time in this way, he did not forget to train himself to become a strong warrior. Now, one spring day, the princess and Isun Boshi visited a temple near the lord's house. And on their way home, a terrible demon suddenly appeared with a magic hammer, started trying to catch the princess. I won't let you touch the princess, you ugly demon, shouted Isun Boshi, drawing his sword. Ha ha ha, you small thing. I'm going to eat you up, said the demon, and picked Isunboshi up and threw the boy into his mouth. Gulp. Inside the demon's belly, Isunboshi began slashing and stabbing with his needle sword. Ouch, that hurts. The demon fell down on the ground, writhing and clutching his stomach. Stop it, I won't ever be bad again. So please stop it, cried the demon. Open your mouth and let me out, shouted Isunboshi from inside the demon's stomach. The demon fled in tears as soon as he spit out Isunboshi. When the princess thanked Isunboshi, she found something the demon left behind. It's a magic hammer, she exclaimed. Now we can make a wish. Then she shook the hammer and said, please let Isunboshi grow taller. Each time she shook the hammer, Isunboshi grew 1 inch taller, and finally became a handsome young man as tall as the princess. Isunboshi and the princess were overjoyed. For years past, Isunboshi and the princess were married, and Isunboshi sent for his mother and father, who came to stay with the newlywed couple, and they all lived happily ever after. So here again we have that size anxiety, although this one doesn't have as much of the hunger motif. I forgot to tell you, a lot of the fractured fairy tales end on corny jokes, and this one ended on, if you remember back to Thumb Tum eating everything, the witch's cheese house, and the mud pies at the end. He's very hungry, so the new kingdom is the kingdom of Hungary. Like the country Hungary. Okay, so that's a little bonus version, the Japanese version. Thought you'd enjoy. And that's our poem and our fractured fairy tale for this week. Hope you enjoyed it.